Hey friend, I'm Erin. Welcome to my channel. I am back today with another interview in our series with fellow Milspouse photographers inside Photographers Changing Stations. I am super excited to have Christy Hunter here with me today. Christy, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Erin. I'm excited to chat today.
Yes, me too. You feel like one of my online friends that should be an in-person friend. So hopefully we can make that happen someday. Right now we are not close at all to each other, but really excited to chat with you and have you here. So
Yeah, military struggles for real.
Yeah, seriously. I've joked with Melissa before, like you make a good friend and then one of them moves. Like that just is how it is. So awesome. Well, let's jump into like your typical Milspouse intro. Tell us a little bit about you, what your military journey's been like, and what business is like for you.
Sure. I've probably got a little bit of a strange military history.
Love it.
Because I met my husband while he was already 3/4 of the way through his military career.
Gotcha.
So I come from a military background. My dad was in the military, but he was only in for 10 years before he was medically discharged. And the entire time that he was in the military, we did not move. He stayed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky.
Wild.
So yeah, he deployed several times and went for, different missions and things, but we were never required to leave. And so even though I come from a military background, I didn't have that transition of like constantly moving and relocating. And then I met my husband, who I told myself I would never be with anyone in the military because I didn't want to move all over the place. And he's now taken me further and further from home with every single move that we've made so far.
Oh my goodness. So tell me where you are now and where you've been.
So we started at Fort Campbell. He was stationed there, and I lived there in Clarksville. I lived there for 30 years and met him there. We moved then to Sierra Vista, Arizona at Fort Huachuca. So we went from, green desert Tennessee portfolio to, having to go to the desert with, no trees and grass.
Yes.
And now we are in Washington State. So this will be our final station before retirement, and we will be traveling all the way back to Tennessee.
Oh my goodness. I feel you on the portfolio changes when we went from Albuquerque to DC. Like that's a stark difference. And even DC to Ohio, since I shot so much at the different monuments and things on the National Mall, like there's none of that here. So that can be a challenge. But okay, talk to me timeline about your business. Did you start before you met your husband? Okay.
I did.
Yeah. What was the transition like?
So I met him around the time that I was falling back in love with photography. Long story, but I wanted to be a photographer from a very young age. I'm the oldest in my family and the first one to go to college. And the school that I wanted to go to did not have regular financial aid. And so I was like, I cannot put that on my parents to like try and pay out of pocket for college. So I went a different route. Fell in love with photography again years later, right before I met my husband. And the funny thing is, when we were dating, I was still playing around with my grandpa's old DSLR camera, and he bought me my first own camera for my birthday. And so that kind of fledged, the business, everything started. I went super official and into it, like within the matter of 6 to 8 months, fully launched, everything was good. And then he was like, so we're pretty serious, right? Things progressed and then we moved. So my business was only up and running for about a year before I had to restart for the.
Okay. That's similar to my story as well. Actually, I ran it for about a year and I actually almost didn't start because I was like, well, we're moving in a year. Why in the world would I start a business? And well, joke's on me because I did. And here we are. So what was the hardest part of transitioning for you from, I guess it was Tennessee to Arizona?
Yeah, well, other than of course the big portfolio differences, I had no cacti in any of my pictures. It was, and aside from like the shooting, because there's no trees for filtering of light, so it's just very different. But I went from being stationary in the same place for 30 years to being in a completely new location. We had no friends, no family, no connections to anyone where we moved, and I was very apprehensive to explore. I was terrified to go find locations to photograph at because I didn't know, is this private property? Is it public property?
Yeah.
Do I need a permit? Do I not need a permit? Am I stepping on people's toes and I don't know it? And so it was just very intimidating. And a very strange tidbit of Arizona is Fort Huachuca is at a very high elevation where cacti do not grow. So I could not photograph sessions where I lived. I had to travel north about an hour and a half to Tucson, just to get the cacti that I wanted to feature in my portfolio.
Oh my goodness. And I'm sure, imagine you didn't know that until you got there and started looking around, and then it's like,
Yeah,
ah.
I was like, where are all the saguaros at? I don't understand. And then come to find out, we were just at a way high elevation in the mountains, and they couldn't grow there.
Wow, that is super interesting. So, how long did it take you to kind of find your footing once you got established in Arizona?
Oh, well, then imagine this. So, started my business in 2017. We moved in 2019. So, business had been up for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
We moved in the summer of 2019.
I see where this is
So
going.
I started to get situated. I was exploring locations. I signed up for my first bridal show, booked 3 weddings, and the world shut down. So then when I was finally starting to network and go places and go out and explore, COVID hit, and I couldn't even do the job that I was meant to do there. And the few bookings that I did have all had to get rescheduled and moved around. So I, as soon as I started to get up and running, just completely cut, like
Oh
had to
my
stop doing
gosh.
everything.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What rough timing. So I know enough about you to know that in addition to photography, you also do SEO work. So I imagine that happened sometime around all of that as well. Can you talk about that? I want to hear that whole story.
It did. So when I was moving from Tennessee to Arizona, I had a home there. Like I had purchased my own home. I flipped it with my dad. Like it was
Oh.
a foreclosure. Like we had done the whole thing. Like, and the house went away. But I took that money that I made from my house flipping to invest into my business. And I said, okay, custom rebrand, brand new website. Like I had gotten married at that point, so my name had changed. I was
Sure.
like, everything's just gonna launch all at one time. Before, of course, I knew what was coming around the corner. But I knew nothing about SEO other than SEO means being found on Google, and I know that has to do with my website. So when I was looking for a designer, I made sure that they said they would do SEO. I didn't know what that meant. I just
Okay.
know they were supposed to do
Check
it for
that
me.
box.
I was like, yeah. So fast forward 6 months after that, when we had actually moved, because I started the process while I was still in Tennessee before we moved. Like once we had orders and we knew where we were
Sure.
going. And I had started to get all of that in place, and my website had launched. And I was like, okay, Google's going to be really important because I have 0 connections here. And my website was completely invisible. I couldn't find myself anywhere, like nowhere to, the whole search your name, scroll for 20
Sure.
pages, you still can't
Yeah.
find yourself. That was me.
Oh.
And so then I started saying, well, how do I do this? Like, I don't understand. Like, how I was sitting in a hotel room. We had none of our household goods. Everything was still packed away. There was no house. So we were in a hotel for like about 2 to 3 weeks. And I was just like, what does SEO mean? Like, how do I do it? Like, you have to actually do something. And that's when I realized that nothing had been actually done on my website other than putting a couple of words on the page. And that's how I started digging into it for the first time.
Oh my goodness. So at what point did you decide, like, I got this and I want to offer this to other people as opposed to just figuring it out and doing it for yourself?
Oh, yeah. So all of that happened in 2019, and I was doing my own SEO. Within about 6 months, even though the pandemic had hit, I was already on page 1. I was ranking
That's
on page
amazing.
1 in my area. So I knew that I was onto something, and I was
Yeah.
understanding what I was doing. And I was actually reaching out to second shooters who didn't even know who I was because I was so new to the area, but I was booking up. Like my
Yeah.
name hadn't really circulated yet. But I was fast forward like 4 years later, we're getting ready to leave Arizona because he had an extension. So instead of 3 years in the Army, we
Gotcha.
did 4.
Okay.
So we were there 4 years, and one of my like best photography acquaintances said, "Okay, you're leaving. I'm really sad about that, but can you teach me SEO?" Because she didn't want to ask me, knowing that we were competitors.
Sure.
And I said, "Sure." Like I knew that I was having to come back for 3 different weddings
Okay.
that I was going to have to fly back for after our move. And I said, I need a second shooter that I can rely on,
Yeah.
that's not gonna like ghost me before I show up. I will teach you and help you with your SEO in exchange for you being my second
I
shooter.
love it. I
And
love
so
it.
that was kind of our swap. And I went over to her house and we went into her little home office. 7 hours later, I was still talking to her about
Christy.
SEO. We were still working on our website. Like we were still doing all the things. And I was like, I guess I had more to say than I thought.
Yeah, that's
So that's kind of how
amazing.
it all kicked off.
Oh my goodness. So now day to day, what's the split look like for you in terms of shooting weddings versus doing SEO work?
Well, it was a very strange transition again here because we
Okay.
moved from Arizona to Washington. You can see on my website, like I went ahead and changed everything over to the Seattle area. Our military plan was to stay until 2026,
Okay.
but we were 6 months into living here, and my husband goes, "Well, I'm going to retire." So I was like, "Well, I guess there's
Okay.
no point in me trying to book weddings if we're going to leave again, like right
Mhm.
around the corner."
Mhm.
Because here in Washington, it does rain consistently. We have
Yeah.
about 3 months out of the year with sunshine.
Oh.
Other than that, it's a lot of like doom and gloom and rain.
Okay.
And so I had already missed one wedding season. And then there was no point in me trying to go after the second one because we were going to be moving again.
Sure.
So at that point, in tandem with some health issues that I've kind of chatted with you off camera about,
Yeah.
I decided, well, I love running my own business and I love SEO. When I worked with those first couple of people when I was moving from Arizona to Washington, they had amazing results. Like she's on page one for both wedding and family photography still, all good. And I was like, well, let me see what I can do here to
Yeah.
see if there's actually something here to help other people. Because I didn't want to return back to the standard workforce. I still wanted to
Sure.
operate my own
I
business.
feel like once you own your own
And
business, the thought of going back is like,
there's no
oh,
going back.
yeah.
No, there's yeah, no.
Someone else being in charge of
Um,
what I do?
yeah, yeah. So I took that time to say, okay, well, I need to make a pivot. I still have my photography website. I still
Mhm.
plan on going back to shooting once we finally move for the last time.
Yes.
But all of that, is allowed me through all of that experience, both the good and the bad that I've had, to then work with my fellow photographers and other creative small business owners to help them with their SEO and get found as they're
Yes.
PCSing, going to other locations.
Mhm.
And it's just like really breathed new life into me as a small business owner.
That's amazing. And you're doing such good work helping other people. Like it's funny to me when I think of SEO, I know it's the topic in at least the photography space that most people are like, "Ugh, SEO," which I feel deeply as a also math teacher. People are like, "Ugh, math." Like I can't believe you teach that. Like why would you want to do that? Like do you get that reaction from people when you tell people that you work with SEO?
Oh yeah. Well, and the funny part is I always ask anytime I work with someone, whether they're a student of my course or a one-on-one client, I always ask for feedback. Is there
Sure.
anything that I could be working on to do better? And the funny thing is I've had so many people tell me how great of a teacher I am. And
Oh.
when I went to college, I went for foreign languages and they were all like, "Are you going to be a teacher?" I was like, "Absolutely not. I do not want to teach." And now like that's what I'm doing.
Here
And
you are.
apparently I'm doing a pretty good job.
That's
So
amazing.
it does hurt my heart when people like ward it off, but I think I've made some SEO believers out there
Yes,
for sure.
that's awesome. And I can attest to your teaching because I've been in a couple different trainings with you through some of the Caitlin James stuff that we've done together. And yeah, you know your stuff and you do a really good job presenting it. So, coming from another teacher with lots of professional experience, it's really good to see. So, um,
Hi.
yeah. So if we could talk a little bit about SEO, I thinking about our community in particular, a whole bunch of Milspouse photographers frequently moving their businesses from one place to the next. If you had just one piece of advice you could give to somebody who is feeling overwhelmed about an upcoming move, what would you tell them is something simple that they can do to get started with their SEO?
Well, I know it's hard in the military community because a lot of the times there's so much uncertainty before a move.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, "Oh, well, you have soft orders, but nothing's guaranteed yet." Like there's a lot of that scariness of like, do I go ahead and start making changes when nothing is set in stone?
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of to me a risk that we have to take a little bit, simply because, well, you're probably not staying where you are, so you're going to have to change things no matter what. So as soon as you have a pretty certain idea, those soft or hard orders of where you're going to go, start making those changes on your website. Start adjusting your content to focus on your new location. And
Mm-hmm.
it comes from like transitioning your website, right? Like that's important to make sure that we're going ahead and making those changes. But aside from your website, like we know how important connection is in our
Yeah.
industry. start reaching out to people on social media. Find other vendors or other photographers that you could network with. Start building up that, referral base. Whatever you can do long distance, as much as I would say, well, go fly out there 6 months ahead of time and do some portfolio building sessions. That's wonderful, but we don't always have, the ability to do that. So just as soon as you have confidence in that forward movement, go ahead and start making those changes.
How do you balance that? I'm going to throw you an outlier case of myself. We are in this very weird season where we actually knew our next 2 assignments before we left the last one. And I know, it's like unheard of, right? This is not normal. But we were in DC. We had 8 months notice before coming to Ohio. And then we know my husband's program here is 18 months. We're moving March, April of 2026 to Colorado. So how do you balance, like, in my case, I already know my next spot, but even when I was leaving DC, I was trying to play with the timing. Like, my website was working there and I wanted to keep booking clients there. So I didn't want to change my website too soon because I didn't want to confuse people coming in. Have you found a sweet spot, or you just kind of play around with it and see what works?
It's hard. It depends on the type of content and the changes that you're making.
Okay.
So, for example, I photographed weddings when I lived in Tennessee that I blogged about, and I still get inquiries for that content and have flown back to photograph weddings in Tennessee, even though I haven't lived there for a long time now. Because that content is still there. I didn't remove it. I didn't no index it and hide it from Google. It's still there to work for me in the background. So some of your content that are like portfolio type sessions or education about locations or venues, things like that can still work for you. But when it comes to your actual homepage or your dedicated service pages where you're hoping to be found for, photographer in X city, the problem is SEO takes time. Like, Google has to then come back to your website, crawl it a couple of times, see that consistency, and understand the new direction that you're going in. So the longer that you take to make that change, even if it's for legitimately good reasons, the longer it's going to take Google to understand your new move.
Yeah. Ugh, it's hard. I feel like that's part of why it stresses people out. Like, if you know exactly what to do and when, great, but especially with the military, every situation is slightly different. Like I said, I know I'm an anomaly. It's great. We love knowing the next place we're already going, but that's not normal. And so, yeah, it just, adds to the confusion, I think, to it.
Well, and you can go ahead and start creating forward content for your new location. So while it would be really helpful, especially for a very scenic area like Colorado, to be able to do some of those portfolio building sessions, if you have the ability to plan that far ahead, maybe you go out there in a spring or a summertime and do some sessions. Or maybe it's just researching locations. Maybe it's providing recommendations, like if you're primarily doing family or maternity photography, talking, because I know weddings are a little different, right? Like, I feel like that's a little bit of an easier content builder. But when it comes to portraits, you might be featuring locations in that area. And a lot of what you can do, you can go ahead and research online without physically being there. And there is no rule, nothing is set in stone that says that you cannot go back to a blog post or a page and change it and improve it later on. So maybe you have a piece of content that's primarily word-based that you can start to rank, start to show Google that you're working in that area. But then once you actually have those images and that hands-on experience, you can then go into that content that's already been published on your site that Google has already been recognizing for several months and just improve it and add to it.
That is brilliant. I cannot tell you how many blog posts I've written, and I've never once thought I should go back and make that better. That's a great idea. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay, I could talk to you about SEO all day, and I feel like most people probably could, but one of the reasons there was so much interest in this series is because, yes, we are all Milspouses and we are photographers, but we are so much more than that as well. So I would love to get to know the Christy outside of her business as well. Tell me a little bit about you, what you guys like to do.
Well, and naturally, of course, my first hesitation is I don't have anything fun to share, because so much as a small business owner, my life is my business, and so it's been hard to kind of break free of that, especially with the health issues going on. Then it makes me feel like that is overtaking other parts of my life and not giving that negative space. But something that my husband and I love to do together that I can just sit on the couch and do, doesn't require me to do anything crazy, is to play video games. And so he and
Fun.
I actually we have two Xbox consoles, and he has a monitor that he will put on like a TV tray, and we will sit on the couch next to each other, and he can play his Xbox and I can play mine on the TV.
That is
And so we can
amazing.
do different games but play at the same time.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. What kind of games do you guys like to play?
Oh, so right now I'm playing like an Assassin's Creed game. So like I'm being like a stealthy ninja and going and, doing missions and stuff like that. But this is gonna sound so strange. There is a game called House Flipper, where you
Okay.
literally just will go into a house, like a virtual home that is just trashed, and you clean it and you fix it up and you remodel it and you paint it and you change it. So I get to do all this creative stuff that I love doing, but it's in a video game.
Yes. And you don't
And you're
have to
like
pay
supposed to
to
sell it
actually do it
profit
in your
and
own
do it.
house.
Well, and we've done that. So we know that we're building a home in Tennessee, and we have literally played around with floor plans and design inside of the video game.
Oh my gosh, that is brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you guys competitive? Like, do you play against each other a lot? Or you kind of do your own thing separately?
So usually we don't play games that require us to compete with each other, but we
Okay.
did recently play a video game called Split Fiction that is meant to be a two-player cooperative game.
Okay.
But like it was very much so like you're dodging obstacles and you're fighting bosses together and doing all this stuff. And like I'd be like, well, who died more that round, like me or you? So competitiveness like kind of creeps in whether we mean to it or not,
That
or
is
not.
so
But we
funny.
try not to purposely go after each other.
Yes. We learned very early on that I am like uber competitive. I'm one of four. I have three brothers. So, like, being the only girl growing up, there was no choice. Like, you were just competitive.
Naturally.
And so, funny story, Matt and I actually met in high school. And in our friend group, it was like right after we started dating, I pulled his name for Secret Santa. And he's very smart. And the first time we played checkers against each other, I just destroyed him. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know how to play checkers? So for Secret Santa, I got him Checkers for Dummies. And he read the entire thing cover to cover. The next time we played, he smoked me. And I'm like, 16-year-old Erin at the time. And I was like, what the heck was that? Like, who actually reads those books? That was supposed to be funny. And he's like, no, you told me how to beat you. Like, I'm going to read it and I'm going to beat you. So we very quickly learned that cooperative games are the way for us, because we both like to play games too. Though when we were stationed in Montana, we played Pandemic a lot, and then once the actual pandemic hit, we're like, this is a little less fun. Like,
Doesn't feel
it
right.
just hits a little too close to home. So,
Right.
does that translate to you guys at all to board games as well, or do you pretty much stick to video games?
Yeah, so and this is gonna really make me seem like a nerd. So I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
Okay.
That's how I got into languages way back then. I taught myself how to like write Elvish, and I could say certain words, like do the whole thing. So then I went to school for foreign languages. I couldn't go take Elvish, but I took Spanish and French. And so we actually have a Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit game. And sometimes we won't even bring the board game out. Like we'll just get the card deck and start quizzing each other. So we'll do that sometimes. But I love playing a card game. It's an oldie but a goodie, but it's called Phase 10. And I love
Okay.
playing Phase 10, but he pretty much always loses every time we play. And so now he just doesn't want to play that game as much anymore.
I mean, I can relate. Oh, that's so funny. Awesome. Well, I like to wrap up these conversations with kind of a fun question, and I'm going to keep with the theme for the last couple that I've done. And
Okay.
it's, I think, appropriate for you because you've talked about not having to move around a whole lot. Obviously, you've made a couple, but not as much as you would expect with both being a military kid and a military spouse. If you
Yeah.
could be stationed anywhere, where would you go and why?
It's hard to think about being stationed outside of the country because it makes it harder for family travel. I do have two step
Yeah.
kids, so we try not to go too far away. But if I
Okay.
didn't have to worry about any of that, I would definitely say that I would want to be stationed in Japan. I've always randomness. I did martial arts for like 6 years growing up, like
Oh,
first
cool.
degree black belt, all the commitment. But I just fell in love with Japanese culture. And before the pandemic hit, We had just gone to New Zealand, Lord of the Rings territory. We got engaged
it.
climbing Mount Doom, like did the whole thing.
Oh.
But then we were like, well, where do we go next? And we wanted to go to Japan. And we were saving. I was protecting that money with my life. And then the pandemic hit and all of that got put on hold. But we've still been thinking about it. We still think about, traveling there. He doesn't like to travel very much because he has deployed a total of 7 times within his career,
Wow.
if maybe a little bit more than that. And so the idea of going out of the country doesn't like entertain him very much. So it has to be something worthwhile for him to think about leaving. And Japan is definitely one of those places.
Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully that's like a post-military life adventure that you have coming not too far down the line.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting. Can you tell anyone who's watching where to find you if they want to just connect Milspouse life or SEO stuff? Tell us all the places.
Yeah. So my website, me being an SEO specialist, that's like where I spend most of my effort into showing up there is going to be there. That is SEOcoachingforcreatives.com. And my Instagram handle is the same. So it's also SEO Coaching for Creatives. If you still want to see my photography work, like my Instagram profile and website still up, that's at Christy Hunter Photos. But usually I warn people, if you message me on Instagram, just be prepared to get a voice memo back because that's like my favorite way to communicate.
Yes, I love that. Especially like now that I usually have Instagram up on my computer during the workday. And so I'm like used to typing on the keyboard for that. But then I like go to respond to a DM with my thumbs on my phone. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to talk to you instead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for chatting. It was lovely to talk to you today. And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Christy.